but I didn't know anybody when it happened to me, right? Until I started looking online. I lose my train of thought sometimes, which we probably all go through.
Mm-hmm.
The advocating for ourselves.
Let me take over. It'll come back to you.
I knew this would happen.
Yeah. You were telling me. You were telling me about
we're just
what you
dealing
like about
with
me.
Right.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to Recovery After Stroke, a podcast full of answers, advice and practical tools for stroke survivors to help you take back your life after a stroke and build a stronger future. I'm your host, 3 times stroke survivor, Bill Gassiamis. After my own life was turned upside down and I went from being an active father to being stuck in hospital, I knew if I ever wanted to get back to the life I loved before, my recovery was up to me. After years of researching and discovering, I learned how to heal my brain and rebuild a healthier and happier life than I'd ever dreamed possible. And now I've made it my mission to empower other stroke survivors like you to recover faster, achieve your goals, and take back the freedom you deserve. If you enjoy this episode and want more resources, accessible training, and hands-on support, check out my Recovery After Stroke membership community. Created especially for stroke survivors, this is a clear pathway to transform your symptoms, reduce your anxiety, and navigate your journey to recovery with confidence. Head to recoveryafterstroke.com to find out more after this podcast. But for now, let's dive into today's episode. This is episode 146, and my guest today is Emily Knosher, who experienced a bleed in the brain aged 25 due to complications from brain surgery. Emily has learned to overcome hemiparesis, foot drop, and many other challenges stroke survivors face. Emily Knosher, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. Tell me a little bit about your story. What happened to you?
My brain injury happened when I was 25. It was 2015. I was in my 5th year of teaching public school. I was a chorus teacher and piano and theater and all the active stuff. I was even coaching the lacrosse teams because the girls were just desperate, I guess, and they found out I played lacrosse, so they knocked on the door of the chorus teacher to do that. So I did, but I was heavily involved in a lot of stuff. And one night I was going to sleep, and the next thing I know, I woke up, and my fiance at the time told me I had a seizure, a grand mal seizure, a big one.
He noticed you were having a seizure, and the first time you found out about it was when he told you.
Yes. So it happened in my sleep, or right as I was going to sleep or something, but I was definitely unconscious. And that was scary. So, I wake up and there's just EMT in my room and they're taking me to the hospital. So they did a CT scan. And for me, my story is a little unique. Doctors told me I had a brain tumor in my temporal lobe on my right side. And it was that night where it looked really big on the scans, and the neurosurgeon was like, I'm just going to take that out the next morning, right? So I went under for a brain tumor resection. And during the surgery, at some point, or they mentioned shortly after they closed me up or something, they're not sure, I had a hemorrhage. And I woke up paralyzed on my left side, a lot of brain fog, a lot of confusion. Nothing was right. So I relate to the stroke community. I know it's not exactly a lot of strokes are different. It's not the typical experience, but the experience it seems that we all share is the being one person and then waking up the next day and being someone totally different.
Yeah.
I think we all share.
What you said is really interesting is that you relate to stroke survivors. The thing is, I went for about nearly 3 years before somebody said to me, "You've had a hemorrhagic stroke," because it wasn't typical. And because a bleed is not considered an ischemic stroke, it's not really dealt with in the stroke ward in the same way. It's dealt by, it's dealt with by a different specialist group of people. They kind of don't tell you that what's happened to you, it's different from a blockage or a ischemic stroke or a blood clot in your head or whatever. But it makes you feel the same and you have the same impact, and your brain goes out of action in a similar way, and then you have to recover in a similar way. No one told me any of that. So I felt like you, and I was kind of wondering, like, did I really have a stroke or didn't I? Like, was it the same? Can I say that? And it turns out that it was a hemorrhagic stroke, and that's the best way that they can describe it. But it's not dealt with in the hospital by the same group of people that deal with the ischemic strokes, and makes kind of sense because they're dealing with blood vessels that have burst rather than a blood vessel that's blocked. Now, the tumor, was that the first time that you sensed that there might be something going on in your head? Did you ever get massive headaches or all those challenges?
So something I do like to speak about on the rare occasion I get to is that I was experiencing short focal seizures for years, but we didn't know what it was, and pediatricians didn't know what they were. So what my pediatrician told me was that they thought they kind of misdiagnosed it as a headache, right? You'll hear headaches or seizure, any kind of seizure activity can be it's very diverse way of presenting itself with brain tumors or any kind of seizure activity. And my mother had a history of migraines. So my pediatrician at, I think 17 or so said, "Oh, they're probably just mini migraines." And so for me, it felt like I knew they would come on because I had an aura, and they lasted maybe 30 to 60 seconds. I would feel like a warmth wash over me from the top of my head down. And I would have a little involuntary muscle movement, like swallowing was a thing. I'd get kind of hot, and then it would go away. I was driving through these. I was teaching through these at 25. I just lived with them for years, just thinking, oh, I'll get migraines one day. That was the only sign that I had this tumor growing larger and larger in my brain, until finally it presented with a grand mal seizure, just out of the blue. And I'm really lucky and really blessed that it happened in my bed on a soft surface with someone with me, because that's not the case for everybody.
No. How big was the tumor by the time it was discovered?
It was about, they say, a size of a golf ball. I have a few scans I post every year on my Instagram. About a size of a golf ball. It's a pretty rare tumor. It's called a ganglioglioma. Mostly benign, but mine happened to be a grade 2, just a little more aggressive. So, but because of the nature of it and how big it was and how close to the surface of my skull it was, I suppose, the neurosurgeon was like, let me just get it. Let me just go in there and take it all out. And what do I know? I'm scared. You know nothing when you get to a hospital and someone gives you bad news like that. But nobody wants a brain tumor. So you're like, do whatever you got to do to get it out of me. And so it goes. Oftentimes, I do want to say, through my own healing and research, brain surgeries aren't a death sentence. They don't typically happen the way it happened to me. There are plenty of safe and fine brain surgeries that happen, and the patient just walks out the next day. I've actually had 2, so my second one went fine. but to me, I was a little unlucky.
Now you've got a door there that they can just open whenever they feel like and go in.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Did they go in from the same spot, or was it a different spot?
It was the same spot because it was a little regrowth of the same tumor 5 years later.
Okay.
Another shock, but teeny tiny. They had to go in there and get it. But believe me, I held the same neurosurgeon to the wall, and I said, I can't do it again, man. Like, Bill, I'm so inspired by you, because you've had 3 experiences. And I had to tell my neurosurgeon, I'm like, you're not going in there unless you can promise me that's not going to happen again, because I could do it once. I don't know how I did it, but I know I can't do it twice. So just know that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. He or she?
He.
Yeah, my neurosurgeon was an amazing lady. She was the second neurosurgeon that I consulted with, and when I met her in, so it happened in Feb 2012, then it happened in March 2012, and then it happened in 2014, in November 2014. And when I met her in November 2014, she came up to me, she says, "Oh, we're going in. That's it. We're getting it out." And then I said, "Okay, whatever, Kate, you do whatever you like, And by now I was over it. I just wanted it out. And then I said to her, and then she came back and said, "Are we going to take it out? Is that what you want?" And I said, "Yeah, please, please. I trust you. Do whatever you got to do, and I'll deal with the stuff that happens later. Whatever happens, happens, And I had no, I was good. I didn't do the fear. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was really, really well prepared emotionally and mentally and physically. I had just decided that it was going to be an experience that I was going to have, and I was going to just deal with anything. I've never been so focused and so comfortable with somebody opening up my head, ever. Like, it was just so amazing. And the issue for me was that when I woke up, I had left side numbness, so it wasn't paralysis per se, but it was more sensory neuron issues. Therefore, the neurons kind of a little bit sleepy. They don't know when my foot's on the ground. I don't know where my hand is in space and all that kind of stuff. So I had to learn how to walk again and all that kind of stuff. And I've got a little bit of left side atrophy and all the stuff that most people who've had a stroke talk about with one of their sides. And for me, I didn't even think about it for a minute as if, oh shit, now I've got this atrophy stuff. It's like, oh, okay, this is just the next part of the process. This is just the next thing that I have to get through and overcome. I've never thought about I can't walk again. I never thought about I might not walk again. It just did not enter my mind. It was just, okay, what's the next job? This is the next job. All right, get onto it. Let's get that done. So perhaps I would have had a different outcome or outlook if I did end up being permanently in a wheelchair or for a longer period of time. But I don't know, it just didn't occur to me. When you were preparing for that second surgery, I know you put him up against the wall and that, but what were your feelings saying and doing to you? Like, what was it feeling like?
So something I think we have in common, which I like about you, is the acceptance, but also a little bit of the kind of fed upness with what resources we have out there, which are very limited, and just being in this position. And we really have to advocate for ourselves to get anything done. So the first time was a surprise, and grief happened. Years went by. 5 years went by. I didn't expect to have a recurrence of the brain tumor, right? So that was a big shock when I got the yearly scan and they saw a little something. I was very cool in the same kind of way you're describing, because it's like, well, I guess I'm just a brain tumor person. I didn't avoid it. I almost avoided it, but that's just not my path. Now I need to monitor it for the rest of my life. Like, that kind of gravity hits you. But what are you to do? Like, that's just how it is. And again, through all of this, I've found myself, and with all the stories shared online, I'm so grateful for Instagram, which is such a funny thing to say, but I didn't know anybody when it happened to me, right? Until I started looking online. I lose my train of thought sometimes, which we probably all go through. The advocating for ourselves.
Let me take over. It'll come back to you.
I knew this would happen.
Yeah. You were telling me. You were telling me about
we're
what
just
you
dealing
like
with
about
it.
me.
Right. We're just dealing with it at this point. We find a place of peace with it. Right. So I was fueled that way. I went to, I'm now a cancer patient. That's what I was going to say. I feel so lucky after hearing everybody else's stories that I still feel like I got it a little better than others.
Easy.
You know how we can always maybe, but because my brain tumor is practically benign. It's not an aggressive cancer. It could always be worse, right? So always remembering that and realizing that I was given this because I can manage it, kind of thing. I was a perfect person to give this stuff to. That's what kind of hit me the second time that I realized that I'd have to have my brain cut into again. And however, when I did leave the consultation, because I was at the consultation, I saw that man for the first time in years. And we never really talked about it. I don't know if that happens to other people, but your neurosurgeons, if something goes wrong, sometimes you don't hear a lot about what happened and you're kind of left to wonder. And I didn't get closure for a long time until that day. So I'm like, we're not messing around anymore. Like, if you're going to go back in there, I need to trust you. So in the consultation with my mom and dad, I was like, okay, what's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. Like, how are we going to do it? And then when I drive home from the initial MRI, when they're getting ready to map out my brain surgery, I have a complete freak out. I have all the walls crumbled down. And I was like, how could I possibly let someone into my head? Like, there are possibly other options. I can't, like, what if it happens again? I was scared. I had a big freak out moment. I think I was just crying on the drive home, freaking out. So that's when I called him. And that's looping back to this advocacy thing, because it's really unfair that neuro patients don't really get an in-depth explanation to what is about to happen to us, or what did happen to us, right? So before I told him I was going to rip that surgery off the schedule, unless he treated me with the same respect as he would a colleague and explained to me with technical terms where he's cutting into. I mean, like, all of us stroke survivors are basically neurologists at this point. We are brain experts. We could be doctors. Like, it's not like we haven't studied ourselves, because nobody tells you anything. Yeah. So I'm like, you're going to use technical terms. I want to know where you're cutting in. I want to go beginning to end process. I want you to tell me this part of the brain, nothing happens there. Like, what, if it were to bleed again, what am I looking at? And he respected that. He walked me through it, just like a med student. And he confirmed that that little anterior part of my temporal lobe basically has no purpose. So if something were to go wrong, there's like a no chance it could bleed somewhere else. I'm like, okay, we'll do it. But that's the confidence and, like, the power I've kind of built over time with not getting any answers from the medical community much. You've explained in other podcasts, like, you feel like nobody, like, people don't know what to do with you half the time. There's not the resource that we need, especially if you're a young stroke survivor. We just throw them for a loop.
Because it's older people dealing with you. And when you're a younger stroke survivor, they can't relate. Most of them are neurosurgeons and doctors. They can't relate to normal people anyway. So it's almost impossible to relate to a young patient. You have to be a really unique person. My surgeon, what you just described that you needed is what I needed. She had me an hour before I was in surgery in the consulting room with all her team, all the guys and gals who were going to cut me open at some way, shape or form, and asking them in front of me with my scan on the screen, show me where the entry point's going to be. And one of the guys goes, here. And then she goes, no, and hits him, like gives him the elbow. And he goes, no, that's not the entry point. We're not going in through there. We can't go there. If we go through there, what are we going to get to? Or what's going to happen? And he's, freaking out in front of the patient and, his colleagues and everybody. And he got it right. He fumbled through it and he got it right. And I just looked at her and she looked at me and I thought, uh-oh, hopefully she's going to be there telling him, no, that you got to go around the corner, go the other way. Don't go that way. So I got that. That was great. I had a insight into what they were doing, how they were doing it. What I didn't know was what the impact might be, because of course they can't predict it, so they don't really tell you. And then when I woke up, I realized that I had these issues, and from and what happened to me was like, I wonder, that part of the brain and that part of the brain, what does it do? I ask the same questions that you asked, and then I put that in a PDF so somebody can go to my website and download a document. It's free, called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. And it's those questions that I wanted to ask, which was, okay, so where that stroke happened, what does that do to a person if they get affected there? And a couple of other questions. So I feel like maybe there's only that we're unique. There's not a lot of people that are as curious as we are and need to know all the answers. I certainly have seen that lots of people just put all the faith in the doctors, and that's kind of okay when you're not sure about how to approach things, perhaps, and you're scared or whatever. But I don't trust people a lot. You've got to earn my trust. And if your approach is wrong, then I don't care how gifted you are and how amazing a surgeon you are and how much they say you're the best in the planet. Like, I'm not going to rate you. If I can't trust you, I'm not going to rate you. So that's my approach. It sounds similar to you.
I truly think those resources will make a big difference, because I think it's fear. It's not always just, oh, maybe, we just grew up more curious, or we just read more books or something, and our minds just go there. But there is that, well, I trusted my doctor too the first time, because truly I know nothing at that point. Brain tumors were not on my list of things to research. They just weren't. So, but the fact that we've learned from that, and if we even have a one chance of changing somebody's recovery because we empower them to ask the right questions, to not be afraid. Doctors are very intimidating.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
There's some real sad stories out there of people that do not get the care they need because they don't know how to ask. They're too afraid to ask. So I think it's really important work you're doing. And that's one thing that really breaks my heart. Connecting with other, survivors online. Some people are right at ground zero, and I just talk to them all night and tell them, you got to do this, you got to do that. Like, don't let them tell you that. Because we just have to take what we've learned and give back. Because that's really heartbreaking when someone falls through. They could have had a good recovery.
Yeah, that mentoring kind of role is really useful, and that's basically what I try and do now after stroke, because you very rarely get to speak to somebody as they're about to go into surgery or before surgery. You very rarely get to speak to somebody about that. But I definitely feel like we need to mentor more people that are seeking support and answers, because we know we've been there, right? So that's what it's for. So I was afraid and all that kind of stuff, but I went into my first few meetings with my doctors and said, these are not the right people for me. So I left that hospital 6 weeks after my first and second bleds, and I went into another hospital, and I found somebody who did suit me, who did speak to me the way that I needed to speak to, who taught me what I needed to know about my procedure, rather than turn up at the end of my bed, talk about me, and not involve me in the conversation. It was just wrong, and it was old school, and things are changing and they're moving on. So I feel like people that are listening to this who feel like they need to be more empowered, just seek it out from wherever you can, and don't listen to people tell you things you don't want to hear. If you're being ridiculous and they're telling you something that you have to hear, then, but you don't want to hear it, that's different. But if you're not feeling them, if they're not your kind of person, don't go down that path.
That's very good advice. There have been a few times on my grief journey, after 2015, where I've looked at other hospitals that have this new, like, kind of brain surgery, this new device or this whatever. They're on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. I'm like, oh man, if I just said, can I think about it? That night, of course, that just wasn't the environment I was in. It was an emergency. He said, I'm going to take care of it in 2 hours. See you in the morning, and we're just at the mercy sometimes. So, but if I knew, because I heard other people talk about this, then I might have said, like, I'm going to think about it. Is it going to kill me tonight? Like,
yeah.
But we don't know. But
question.
But if I could have had another minute, I wonder if it might have gone differently.
Yeah.
However, I also regret nothing.
Yeah. Because
I really have found the journey irreplaceable, and I love where I am today. So.
Yeah, bit weird journey to find irreplaceable. You're supposed to go on a trip to a beautiful island with crystal blue waters. That's unbelievable and amazing journey. Stroke's not meant to be that way.
We could still do that though, with the right attitude.
Yeah, I love it. It's really cool. So when you woke up from surgery, you had to overcome some physical deficits. What were they?
So I had just classically presented hemiparesis, face, arm, leg, everything on the left side of my body. My tumor was removed over on my right side here. So they noticed as I was waking up that I wasn't moving, and I was transported to the nearest rehabilitation hospital, and I spent a month there just getting back on my feet. Walking came first. They try to get you up on your feet, which I also think my age made a difference, thank goodness. But I did, I spent about a month in the hospital, and that's where I learned other things that make me frustrated about hospitals and stroke recovery, like wanting the answers then when you're in rehab and you're learning about your new body and you have people telling you exactly what to do or what not to do, and you just trust them. And years go by for you and I, right? And I'm reading more things about the complete opposite that we could have tried, or the you've heard the dreaded 6 months deadline, right?
Jesus.
Don't you hate it?
I hate it with a passion. It's so bad.
Oh my God.
Whatever's going to happen, you'll probably be like that for the rest of your life. You'll never walk again. All that stupid shit that you hear doctors say. It is pathetic. I can't believe it. It still happens. It happens every day. If I make a post on Instagram and ask, did your doctor last week say this? I'll probably get a million responses saying, yeah, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Don't believe him.
Yeah. Nothing's more depressing when you're already dealing with, I don't even know the word for what that is. When you wake up and you realize your body left you in a way, and you suddenly can't walk, and I don't know, maybe you have a word for it, but I don't. But because the depression sits in, the shock. Yeah. So nothing's more depressing after the shock factor of someone telling you, oh, by the way, if you don't get better in 6 months, that's all you're going to be. Like, to which I've learned by example and by seeing so many beautiful people just kick strokes ass.
Mm.
Like, that's not the case. Why is that still the narrative? And I've spoke on this a few times. When I ever get to share my story, I let people know that, just the average crowd, that's what people with stroke or history of brain injury, anybody with paralysis, get this death sentence, which is why I'm so passionate about helping people get up, and out of bed.
I tell people off. Don't tell me what I can and can't do. Please, don't give me your limitations. I'm not interested in hearing that. I've had other people who I've coached who have said that to their rehab therapists, and when they've referred to, for example, the arm as the bad hand or the bad leg, or it's like, don't call it bad.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's what we're working on things, but don't call it bad. It hasn't done anything bad.
Gosh, I know there's got to be they have to do better. We all have to do better with how we talk to stroke patients.
Part of it is their own. Well, firstly, they're not a stroke survivor, so I get that part. They don't understand what we're going through. Secondly, they just kind of, in order to understand what they're doing, is they're saying a word to get feedback for the word that you say, to understand like how to try and approach the situation. For example, it's like don't. It's like when you tell a child. It's like you tell the child, instead of hold the glass tightly so it doesn't fall when you're walking with it, you tell the child, don't drop the glass. And in order for the child to actually understand what the hell that means, because they've probably never heard that conversation before, they have to drop the glass. And now they know what don't drop the glass means, because they have to have the experience to be able to respond to it appropriately. So the people who are caring for us, they're on the other side. They've never had this experience. They're saying, look, you're not walking now. And I hate to tell you, I don't want to be the one to tell you, but I don't want you to get disappointed in the future, but you might not walk again. It's like, no, that might be the case, but still, that's not you don't need to tell that story. You don't need to be the one who takes the responsibility to give me that information. You need to say to me that here are your challenges, and here is how previous patients have overcome them, and choose the ones that had a good outcome to set me up for a good outcome. Don't choose the ones that didn't have a good outcome, because they are completely different than me. They had a completely different stroke. They have completely different resources, all sorts of things. So don't do that.
These words that the doctors and nurses and physical therapists and some of them use, and of course I have much respect for our nurses and doctors, and they kept us alive. They changed my bed sheets and stuff. Love them. But the words, the education, the continuing education on how far people go after stroke these days, needs to be integral in the hospitals, because the more people I see or meet or talk to, especially when I see them not walking yet, they're still in a wheelchair, because I want to get them maybe on board with the Freedom to Walk Foundation and get them a device or something. When I see that, I talk to them, and some people just take the sentence they're given, and maybe they don't have a full family support, carers have a hard time, or maybe there are no carers. And I've talked to people who are in young people, in a nursing home, because that's the only option they had. And they think that's it for them, because someone told them that. And we have to undo that, because you could have a device, you could not have a device, you could have medication, no medication, whatever. You could have access to anything. But if someone tells you nope, that's the end for you, it doesn't matter what access you have, because you're not even going to have the spirit to use it. And it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah,
to
it's harder
see.
to undo that work than it is to set a very cool, lovely intention and a great possibility and provide hope. You don't have to undo providing hope, but you do have to undo the shit that somebody implants that's not real. And when the person as well is at their most vulnerable, they just came out of surgery, they've got a hole in their head, give
Yeah,
them
they're
a
taking it
little bit
all
of
in.
time, man. Give them a bit of time to overcome some shit. They just got out of surgery.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we can curse, by the way. I've been holding myself back.
Yeah, we can say a little bit of shit. Yeah, this one, this one is a real passionate one. Like I get really frustrated about it. It annoys the heck out of me, and I don't want to mince my words about it. There's no point because people don't. When we're being polite, people think, oh yeah, he's all right about it. No, I'm not all right about it at all. I'm really annoyed about it. It happens too much and it happens to too many people. And I'm here to tell you that you need to not do that. And it's you that needs to change, not that person that's in the room that's there for you to help them. You need to advance your intelligence so that you're a better therapist, so that you do not implant negative thought patterns of your own into your vulnerable patients.
100%
And if I have to say
agree.
shit, while I'm talking to you, I'm going to say it. And if you get offended, that's your problem.
Yeah.
So that's
I
my
agree.
little rant over. So yeah, okay. So you had to do a fair bit of rehab. So you're in rehab for a month and then you went home. Was there outpatient rehab? What was life like when you went back home? Because that was completely different.
Well, 25 years old, living in my own apartment or condo at the time. I went home to mom and dad. So if I didn't have my family for support and being the positive cheerleader, then I don't know where I would be. So I was very blessed to have that family. So I was, happy to go home with mom and dad and try not to think about that I'm a 25-year-old with a cane. I just got to call every once in a while, Ma, where's my cane? It's just funny. You got to laugh.
You gotta laugh.
Yeah. When you go home, when they finally deem you not a fall risk, right? I left with a cane and an AFO brace, just the type they give you in the hospital. I got a better one, an outpatient, to start kind of walking a little more. It was a little stressful. My carers, my wonderful, sweet parents had to watch me 24 hours. And I'm not in a good mood, of course, because there's all sorts of things happening. I'm teaching. My goodness. I was like, what are my students doing right now? As if I needed to care. I didn't need to care, but it's it's ingrained in you of like, how could I be away from work this long? So it was a lot of just being helped to the bathroom, being helped being fed, going to outpatient rehab, and really just kind of understanding this new part of existence. I didn't know how long it was going to take. I didn't know. Every day was kind of you just go through the paces, right? But something, and I love to hear these stories about folks with their carers, is that for me, I was sick of it very quickly. I knew I could walk with a cane. So I'm like, what's with this 24-hour watch thing? And pretty shortly, to my mother's dismay, I was taking calculated risks for myself. I think you mentioned earlier, which is about kind of just empowering yourself, trying things to find out if you can do it. That's how we're going to recover. It's not by someone telling us what we can and can't do. You have to find out for yourself in the safest way possible. I do. Even though I like to say that I had a big dose of F this, I'm going to do what I want, I still made sure I was doing it either observed or safely. I wasn't being too reckless. So it wasn't very long before I told my mom, I'm like, I'm going to make my own breakfast today. And I walked over with my cane and I hung out on the counter and I just did like a bowl of cereal. But I tell you, when you make that first bowl of cereal for yourself and you take a piece of your independence back, that is the start of it. If you can do that, you start thinking about, well, maybe I will wheel myself to the bathroom. Maybe I will walk with my cane to the bathroom. And then suddenly you're on this snowball of like, did it. It's not that scary. It is scary. But once you achieve these little things, they start to add up. And before you know it, I walked down the stairs by myself and my mom yelled at me. Had a heart attack that I ended up on the bottom floor without anybody knowing about it.
Yeah.
But that's such an integral part for me, because that's when I knew I had to not limit myself because of everyone else's fears around me. They fear out of love, of course. They don't need me falling down the stairs after a brain injury. But sometimes listening to those voices and reading that material and just will prevent you from trying. And then it'll prevent you from having an amazing recovery that you might not have gotten to have if you listen to everybody else.
It's
right?
like the old days, isn't it? When you were growing up, when you were little, you go climb a tree and mum and dad would sit at the bottom of the tree the first few times and make sure you didn't fall. And the third, fourth, 10th time they'd say, look, just be careful you don't fall.
Yeah. Also gave my mom a heart attack, I'm sure. But
that's, but see, but that is, it's not that they're scared, that they're scared for you because they love you or they care. They're scared because they're scared, because they can't relate to the whole situation and they don't know what it's like again. And they see you as vulnerable and they see you as, injured or whatever they see you as. And then they try and go, we don't want her to have more of that. We want to have less of that. So if she doesn't go down the stairs, then she'll be okay. Well, how long am I not going to go down the stairs for? How many years am I going to sit at the top of the stairs and look at them? It's not how it works. And you're right. That's what you do. You kind of have to go against authority or against, the emotional blackmail or whatever it is. And you got to put your toe in the water and you got to say, is it going to burn? Is it going to, what's the situation? And then if you overcome it, then you can go, well, how can I do that again next time? Or what is the next biggest risk?
Yes. And that's the best. So that mastering of my own house and testing the waters and saying sorry for upsetting because she is my mother, I'm not sorry for taking the risk, but I'm sorry she got upset so much. And just, balancing your household with your carers and keeping open communication of what you need and what you need to do to deal, is very important. So what that led to was being trusted with more movement. I had my AFO at that point and my cane. And I started with a walk around the block, a hobble around the block, whatever. But at that point, I had enough fed upness and kind of anger in me. I was like, I don't care what I look like. I'm going to get walking. So I took my little cane and I walked around the block. Soon I was going by myself and soon I was going without the cane. And that's that level up that stroke survivors can do just by testing the waters, like you said, and not being afraid of upsetting anybody, not being afraid of your own body. You know your body better than anyone else, no matter who they are.
And did you ever fall?
The only falls I've ever had was one in the hospital where the nurse dropped me. That was not me.
Me too.
And I have had one or two falls only when I started practicing jogging, because I got there after taking these baby steps. I was like, wow, I can do that. I had my dad with me the first time. I did it safely. It was more of like a old man shuffle, in the beginning, but it's something. And the more you practice, practice makes permanent in the brain injury world. So, I've gotten a little cocky and these, years later, and tried to run on maybe a little tired left ankle, and I've definitely eaten pavement, but, and then I stop. So I reel it in and make sure I'm being as safe as possible sometimes. But that's it. I didn't fall.
That's not too bad. I got dropped by a nurse in the hospital as well. Probably 4 hours after surgery.
Oh my God, the paperwork. Imagine.
I don't know that there was any. Like, it was really bizarre, right? So my left side's out of action, and then they come to get you up to take you to the toilet for the first time, all that kind of thing. They want you moving straight away. And they haven't assessed me yet. Nobody knows what the impact of the brain surgery has had, what impact that's had. And she was, I'm not quite 6 foot, but maybe I'm about, I don't know, 5'10" or something, 5'11". And she's maybe 5 foot. And she said to me, "Have you been to the toilet yet?" And I said, "No." She goes, "All right, let me help you out." I get out on the left side of the bed because she happened to come to the left side of the bed. I put my left foot down, and she says, "I'll hold you." And she does the whole, puts her arm around me. I'm 84 kilos or something, and she's 50 kilos. And we took one step, and I just went bang straight on my arm.
Oh no.
And I screamed my head off. And it was shock horror. Everyone was just shocked. And I'm not sure what happened, but they must have all swooped me up and got me back in the bed. And then they brought me a pan or a bottle or something like that, because it wasn't going to happen any other way. So, was your fall in hospital, was it the first surgery or the second one?
It was the first surgery. The first surgery led to the stroke. My second surgery was great. I walked out hours later. Thank God. Yeah, it did go as well as it was supposed to. It was just a normal brain surgery.
Yeah.
But no, that was the first one. It was in the rehabilitation hospital. And it might have been it was like a new nurse maybe or something. Maybe not my first trip to the toilet in my room, but it was somebody. Oh, you know what? It was like, we're bending down to get graphic. We were, bending down because that's tough. And she's taking your weight. And she said 1, 2, 3, but I went on 3 and she went on 2 or something. And I was like,
You didn't discuss the number count beforehand. You go, we're going to go 1, 2, 3 and then go, or do we go on?
Yeah. It was a soft fall. Thank goodness. It was definitely I had, my right arm was on it and stuff, but I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. So you told me that you got back into jogging. So you're going to really appreciate episode 28. You're going to be episode 148 or something, 147.
Oh,
episode 28 was Donna Campisi, and she's a local. She was a friend of mine from Melbourne, who came and saw me when I was in hospital. And she had a stroke when she was a young kid, and she ran a marathon about 30 years later. And she wanted to jog and run, and she has an AFO. Okay, so for those who are listening, an AFO is an ankle foot orthosis. So it supports the ankle from dropping down, because she has foot drop, and she ran a 40-kilometer marathon, a full marathon. She trained and trained and trained. She got injured. She went through the ringer to get there, and she finally got there. And when she got there, it took her forever, compared to everybody else who was running, but she made it. She ran the whole marathon. She's just one determined gal. And you'd love that episode. You'd relate to that a lot. I'll share the link on the show notes, and I'll send you the link as well so you can have a listen. But how far have you gone from, with your jogging? How much has it evolved?
Well, I started maybe a year after I really kind of got a pace going. And there was actually in 2016 I'm near Washington, D.C. currently. So there was a race for a cure for brain cancer research. I was like, oh, well, what a perfect reason to get my butt up and be able to complete 3 miles. So that was my goal. I also saw a few others on Instagram that took to running after their stroke, or they have a history of stroke and they're runners and they're ultra marathon runners and marathon runners. I'm like, oh my God. So I did talk to a few of them. I was like, does your ankle hurt? Do you ever fall? Like, and of course they say, oh, it hurts all the time. Just go, just do it. And that's where I adopted the whole, if you feel something, then it's good. Like, this is just muscle growing, you know, it's got to grow back. It's got to get strong. You got to test it. Like, so that was my attitude. And I did successfully complete a 5K. No walking, you know, just that shuffle sometimes, after my stroke in 2016. And that was incredible, because that was one of the things I was dreading, was never being able to run again and taking that for granted. Just like being able to move your body in that way. And I still, you know, it's very careful. I don't run regularly because I found bodybuilding, which is much more static and slow. So I really enjoy that. But I was worried about that. And I still, you know, years later, part of a little grief moment comes when you can't just sprint. You can't just go run for the sake of running. You have to think about every step you take. You have to be careful. You have to, you know, and that's a bit sad, but that's me being picky. Because I know that me running at all in any sense of the word, and whatever it looks like, because, you know, my arm's flopping around all over the place and I'm limping mostly, is such a beautiful achievement to have done after going through a stroke. And I'm so grateful for that.
Absolutely. And I know what you're saying. I was asked recently, you know, don't you ever think about the fact that you're always feeling your left side feels weird and colder and burning and all that kind of stuff. It's like, most days I don't think about it, but sometimes I wake up and I think, yeah, I wish it didn't bloody happen. You know, I wish it just felt normal today because it's bothering me or annoying me. But that kind of wish is like, doesn't achieve anything. It's fruitless. Like, you don't get anything out of it. You just wish something that's never going to happen. So you get frustrated. So you have to accept that as well. And some days it's okay to not accept it and to be crappy about it and to reminisce on your old self. Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I've been there.
You know, I heard a really great saying from one of my colleagues. She has a pastor for her father, right? And he said to her, and I love this, regarding these pity moments we're allowed to have, for sure, but we don't want to get trapped in it for too long, right? She said, her dad would always say, you're allowed to have a pity party, but it has a beginning and an end time. I love it. I love it.
That's perfect, isn't it? I mean, that's
yeah.
Thank you for the permission for me to go down that path. And thank you for giving me time to get to my end time. And I'll eventually get there and then I'll move on and it'll be fine. You found bodybuilding, but were you a bodybuilder beforehand? Did you do any of that? No.
Nah.
She's nodding her head. So you'd really also then appreciate and get along with Kelly Studebaker, who was on episode 106. And she's a power lifter. And man,
love it.
This girl, she is jacked on one side, the other side not so jacked.
That's the life.
Yeah, right. And then she got sucked in as well because somebody said to her, you could probably still do it with one hand. Just give it a go, whatever. That's it. She just got into it and she was off and running. So now on episode 106, I interviewed Kelly, and that is a really cool episode as well. So I can't remember exactly how she ended up having a stroke, but it's a really cool episode. Check it out. Now, you're still a real busy person. It doesn't sound like you've slowed down at all. You picked up a cheeky director's role or board of directors role at the Freedom to Walk Foundation, which is on Instagram as well, at Freedom to Walk Foundation. And I'm so glad I connected with you because I didn't realize this until today, but this is really cool because the Freedom to Walk Foundation supports people with foot drop. Tell me about it.
So I met the Freedom to Walk Foundation because when I was getting my newer AFO device at a hanger clinic in Baltimore, Maryland, they handed me a pamphlet and they said, you seem to have some pretty good ankle movement at this point. We can tell you've been walking. So you might be a good candidate for the Walk Aid, which is one of the two leading competitors of a functional electronic stimulation device, FES device. And
who are the competitors? Because I reckon people have heard of them.
The ones that we help people, we subsidize the cost for is the Walk Aid, which is actually owned by Hanger at this point, and Bioness.
Yep.
Bioness has all sorts of fun things. They have a cuff for walking and foot drop. They have arm attachments and all sorts of things, which is really cool.
All right.
So I got in touch with the Freedom to Walk Foundation. And at that time in 2015, and still, major insurances do not cover these devices. It is a travesty. That device was $5,000 out of pocket when I was able to grasp it at that time. And I couldn't tell you how devastated I was to hear that price tag, because what else could go wrong? Like at this point, it's like, that's like, I could get some physical therapy, or I could take a chance on this Walk Aid, or I don't need to pay I can move in with my parents and not pay. It's just the kind of decisions that people don't need to be making when they're vulnerable. Right. So I contacted the Freedom to Walk Foundation. They have an amazing founder. Her name is Daisy Vega, and she is an MS warrior. So when she developed MS, she developed foot drop, which we might have said earlier is where your ankle muscles are weak and you end up dragging your toe and you might trip over yourself. And you'll see people walk with kind of a funny gait where they kind of lift their leg real high to avoid your foot dragging on the ground. It happens with a lot of neurological chronic conditions. So I think it was her husband who was able to just afford it straight out. He got her a Walk Aid, and she's such a giver. She's such a great woman. She decided to create this foundation to try to reach others that need assistance with this Walk Aid and subsidizing the cost. So, because she doesn't want anybody to go without it. So I got to call her and we fundraised. We did just a typical GoFundMe type of fundraiser. I shared with just my family and friends, and I was really embarrassed about it and I didn't want to do it. But because it's asking for help. Suddenly you're put in this vulnerable position. Not me, not Emily, like never before. And asking for money is the worst, but what we do is we really encourage folks to try it. And what almost happens 99% of the time is that their device is funded within 2 days by their community, their family, and the love around them they never knew existed. And that's what happened to me. My friends and family and schoolmates all helped me subsidize that cost. And I had a Walk Aid. And I tell you, that's what I attribute to getting me to the jogging point. It was, if you're not sure what a Walk Aid is, it has, I meant to bring my little stimulation kit over here so I could show the camera, but I didn't. It just has 2 electrodes that will sit in a cuff. It's very discreet. It's not huge like a AFO. You don't have to wear it over your clothes. You can wear it under your clothes. It's just a cuff that sits right below your knee and it stimulates the right muscles. But what's great about the technology is that the clinician will program it to your gait. So with the swing of your affected leg, it will buzz on with this kind of weight teetering system. And suddenly with every step you take, the electrodes just lift your ankle for you. And you can set it on max, you can set it on min, because the point is, I know, and the point is you want to think it through, we're always thinking about every step we take. So you want to help think it into existence, but over time, it's like you're taking physical therapy with you everywhere you go, and you don't have to think about physical therapy. So the fact that these people don't know about these, first of all, there's not enough access to them, they're way too expensive, is just heartbreaking. And that's what Freedom to Walk Foundation helps remedy. So, so I was a recipient. It got me to running a 5K. I believe in them. And I did some testimonials at the Freedom to Walk Foundation's gala in Florida. They're Florida based, but we help everybody around the US. We'd love to go international too. It's just who we meet, you know. And by last year, they were looking for more volunteers on the board, and I was elected a board member. So now I help direct the operations of the foundation as community outreach.
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate. I find them on Instagram. I have a great eye for foot drop. Also in the grocery store and out in the world. I'm like, hi, have you ever heard of a walk-aid? Like, sorry to bother you. I do. I can't. I ask politely.
I love it. They look like, you know what they look like? They look like a strap that people put their iPhones in when they go running and they're listening to the music. That's exactly what they look like. They don't look like anything different.
It's just a little cuff and a battery pack.
Yeah.
That's it. It's really incredible technology.
And these days, I think it's cool to have stuff attached to you when you're doing things. Makes you look like you're with the times or something. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Their website is freedomtowalkfoundation.org, and they've got a really cool looking website. Easy to navigate, a lot of pictures of the products, and then they talk about their purpose, and they're asking for donations there, and they also have a really cool little statement that says "Changing lives one foot at a time."
Love it.
Isn't that lovely?
Nice? Yeah.
Yeah, it's rewarding, isn't it?
It is. We were talking about this before we started, how I'm so inspired by people who take the shit that happens to them and they turn it around to help others. They learn from it, they accept it, and they don't want other people to go through the same thing they did. And I think that's a really beautiful part of the healing process. It can be. And it's just, it gives some purpose, maybe, to what happened to you. Some people like to think of it that way. Like, it gives, instead of wondering why me, you may be able to formulate an answer to that as you realize that you might be key in somebody else's recovery. Is a really beautiful thing.
That's a pretty cool why me. I mean, that's nothing better than that. If you're supporting somebody to go through what you went through, then because you're further along the line and you know what it's like on the other side, then that's a real good reason to get involved and help people. And it is really rewarding. I find the same thing when I do these podcasts and chat to people from all around the world, like you and everybody else. One of my biggest challenges is the lack of men who come on the podcast. That's one of my biggest challenges. Is I ask a female to come on, and she goes, "Yeah, no worries. They're falling over themselves. I can't keep them away," which is not common for me in my life. Normally, females repelled, except for my wife. She's stuck with me, but the others just repelled. And men, getting them online is so hard. There's not a lot of them on Instagram doing the kind of stuff that a lot of other stroke survivors are doing, or if they are, they do it in the background. So I'm curious about your experience with meeting people with foot drop. Is there a difference to the way the men handle the situation or talk about it? Are they a little bit more reserved? Do they do the the stiff upper lip routine a little more?
Well, I like to think that I'm very charming in person, so I don't think I give them a chance to stiffen up about it. Especially if I meet someone in person, I first of all catch them off guard by saying, "Hey, do you have foot drop? Me too," because they're like, "Who knows? Who knows about that?" So I do find that after I get that kind of sensitive question out of the way, I'm like, well, I'm Emily and I want to tell you about that. Then it's like, okay. And then I might give them Freedom to Walk Foundation information. Just sometimes I ask if they've ever heard of a walk-aid kind of thing. And we might exchange information to get them to the website. But I've never had an issue talking to someone about it.
I'm not charming enough is what you're saying. That's why. the men won't come on board because I'm not charming enough.
I mean, I feel like that might just be the inherent nature.
Yeah.
Society has just made poor guys
Yeah.
have to ignore feelings and not fess up to emotions when it comes to mental health and emotional health. They're already starting behind. And I think that's probably adds to it. The few folks that runner I initially talked to was a man. I have a.
They're always running away from shit. That's why. That's why men run, because they're running away from everything.
I know, you just got to put them on a treadmill so they don't go anywhere. But once you break the ice, so yeah, that's interesting. You gotta get some kind of recruitment kind of. So you gotta maybe talk to them privately first, give your spiel. And
no, I have a podcast. I've spoken to them enough. They listen to the podcast. They just don't do much about it. If there's any men listening to the podcast and they've got to the end of this one, just hit me up for an interview. Just come on board. Let's have a chat about what's going on in your life. I promise I won't ask any probing questions that are too uncomfortable. Emily, you vouch for me. I did all right.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
On the Freedom to Walk Foundation website as well, there's some testimonials. Little Zoe regaining her independence. Oh. She's a little gal. And then there is George in the walk aid, George Kosinski's new walk aid. So there's some real cool ways to get to understand what it is that the walk aids do and how they help, especially when you get to see videos of people and you get to see how they are attached to the leg below the knee. They look like they're going to be very comfortable for most people. I don't see it being an issue at all. And they're available. You can follow the Freedom to Walk Foundation on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well. I'll have all those links there. So it's a really cool foundation. I didn't know it existed, so I'm just so glad. And you need to get somebody from the foundation onto the podcast so I can interview them. Other than you, because I know we brought you on for a different reason, but I could bring on somebody and really give them a lot of time.
Yeah, I could absolutely speak to our founder. It's a very small nonprofit. It's run by her and me, and there are 4 other board members, and that's it. And so growth plan, if we're able, it's a humble nonprofit, helping, being able to reach a lot of the community in Florida, because Daisy is such a networker. She's lovable. Everybody in Clearwater knows about her. I think I've, poached people off of Instagram, and we've gotten walk aids to California and to Pennsylvania and things and Texas just recently. So it's just it's just piece by piece, we're trying to make a difference. So that would be wonderful. She's really lovely. So that would be fun to get her on.
Yeah. How many people have you guys helped, do you think, with this? How many people a year receive support in some way?
Well, last year I got those folks I mentioned, California, Pennsylvania, Texas. We're also thinking of expanding into any walking aid, because there's still folks, especially in Florida, which have a higher population of senior citizens, might just need a walker. I think Daisy has gotten a few of those out, walkers and canes and things that make mobility more comfortable. So we're thinking of maybe expanding to that, say about 5, just ad hoc over the year last year. Okay. And then at our gala every year, we do identify usually a child. We try to get a family who's in crisis with their child that sometimes has a diagnosis of stroke or cerebral palsy, which the walk aid absolutely helps as well, kind of keeps things straight, allows them. That's Zoe on the website. She's a CP patient. And so before, she couldn't walk very well or run, but with that walk aid, it really streamlines things, and she's just running. So we try, our main goal every year on the side is to fundraise to have a walk aid to give away at the gala every year. Nice. To a child in need. And then we do what we can on the sides with our small workforce, as we can.
Well done.
And I do want to say as I did tell you, in 2015, walk aids were going for $5,000. Some good news for all of us is that the walk aid and probably Bioness meeting their cost as well. The walk aid has definitely come down to $2,950, which is still prohibitive for families. So we still want to help and do that work. But just in case someone's listening and, like you said, never heard of it, now I think everybody should have one. It's game changing for recovery. It is ridiculous that people don't know what it is, that you're not hearing about it in the rehab hospitals, that it's still privatized. So I do want to let everyone know that the cost has come down. If you were hearing it and then you heard $5,000 and you feel sad about that, it's come down to $2,950 on average. And they do include unlimited adjustments. Once you get your clinician at Hanger, you're a patient for life as long as you need it. I do want to say that I don't use it anymore. I am appliance free. Yes. Nothing's perfect, but through my acceptance and just loving my body as far as I could take it, and this is me, I wanted to drop all the aids at one point. I felt confident that I can get about safely. And so I stopped using it maybe after 2 years or so. And I said, well, let's see what my body can do now that I've thawed it and the electrodes helped it for 2 years. And I do pretty well. So it really is.
Can they be repurposed?
That's something I've asked before too, which is frustrating because I asked, can I recycle this to somebody? And of course it's not that easy because it's pharma, or else we'd all be sharing $5,000 stuff like our Netflix accounts, right?
It's like a phone. I mean, as if you can't just give it to somebody else and give them a new strap.
I still have it. Yeah, it just needs to be programmed. I still have it. I keep it because one day, as these things develop and costs and all the insurance crap and all that stuff happens, one day I hope to recycle it and just give it back to Hanger.
I feel like there's a opportunity there, a massive opportunity there for all the ones that are out and about that aren't being used, that could be repurposed for people who can't afford $3,000 or $5,000, and who could get it for $1,000 or whatever. But there's got to be an opportunity. Anyway, look, that's me just doing my problem solving stuff again and solving problems and all that kind of thing. And you could harass the manufacturer about that. I think you should harass her. And if you don't want to, I will, because I think that's what should happen.
I know one of the top salesmen in the US because he's come to speak at our gala before. So I know him personally on Instagram, and I should check in.
Definitely.
As if he's not the CEO, but
Yeah, it's a good question. There might be with all these corporations that want to do better things for the world these days, here's a better thing that they can do. Here's something that they can do that's going to make a difference in people's lives. And they could get some real, little ticks for achieving not just an amazing product and selling it for a shitload of money, but also for having an amazing product and repurposing the ones that aren't being used for people who can't afford it.
I'm going to take that idea. I'm going to do at least one action with that and see how far I can go.
I love it. We've achieved a lot today. We've solved problems. I've put you in touch with people who are power lifters and marathoners, and we spoke about the Freedom to Walk Foundation. I really appreciate you being so keen to jump on and share your story and tell us about some of the things that you've been through. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I just truly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the platform. This is so important, the work you're doing. It really is. It's gone through my head. I know it goes through other people's heads that, gosh, we should do so much. We should write a book. We should get resources on. But some of it, I didn't do it, but you did. And so I really thank you for that.
But I love what you said. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it for you acknowledging me. But you did what you did, and you're on the board of something, and you're doing that, and somebody else is doing something ever so simple, which is even responding to an Instagram post that you might not think it means a lot and it's not that important. But the fact that somebody did do that for me one day years ago makes a massive difference. And we don't all have to do podcasts because they're bloody time consuming and no one's got that much downtime. Believe me, and I don't either. They take about 8 hours an episode to get live. Like it's just huge. It's a huge amount of work, right? So don't feel bad if you can't do that. Do something little, something that you can do. Just be nice to somebody. Just send them a message on Insta. Just touch base with them. Just do those things. You're volunteering in this foundation. I'm not going to do that. That means I've got to leave my house. I've got to go somewhere else and do that and meet people in person. And that takes way too much. I'd rather be recording a podcast from the comfort of my own home with heating or air conditioning. I'm that kind of guy. So everyone can participate the way that they feel. And some of us don't have more limitations than us. So they don't have the ability to be so proactive and make it about anyone else. And you know what? It's also really important sometimes to just make it about you and stuff everybody else.
Yes. Especially at the beginning.
Yeah. And that's you and me giving permission to people to just make it about yourself every once in a while, but have that party. At some point it starts and at some point it ends. So when it ends, kick in and bring in other people into your world, because what that does is that is also rewarding, isn't it? And that really makes recovery and the experience that you had, it does make it a little bit kind of worth it, would you say?
I said I have no regrets. I love my life. And I know that's hard for some people to understand, but I know that other survivors like us can understand what I mean when I say that, Yeah.
Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining me on today's podcast. Do you ever wish there was just one place to go for resources, advice, and support in your stroke recovery? Whether you've been navigating your journey for weeks, months, or years, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to get the answers you need. The road is both physically and mentally challenging, from reclaiming your independence to getting back to work to rebuilding your confidence and more. Your symptoms don't follow a rule book, and as soon as you leave hospital, you no longer have medical professionals on tap. I know for me, it felt as if I was teaching myself a new language from scratch with no native speaker in sight. If this sounds like you, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone and there is a better way to navigate your recovery and rebuild a fulfilling life that you love. I've created an inclusive, supportive, and accessible membership called Recovery After Stroke. This all-in-one support and resource program is designed to help you take your health into your own hands. This is your guidebook through every step of the journey, from reducing fatigue to strengthening your brain health to overcoming anxiety and more. To find out more and to join the community, just head to recoveryafterstroke.com. See you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.